Jesus used to be Jewish. That's not what the Gospels say. When I interviewed Christians and Jews for my book, Jesus Uncensored, Restoring the Authentic Jew, I heard over and over, everyone knows Jesus was Jewish. When I told my friend Philip that I was writing a book about the Jewish Jesus, he said, "Why?" and gave the familiar response, "Everyone knows Jesus was Jewish. But do they really know that he was Jewish?" Because when I dug a little deeper, I discovered that everyone knows he was Jewish really means he used to be Jewish. Then I found out that many still believe that Jesus was born Christian and that he launched a new religion. For example, Jane, educated in Catholic grade schools, agreed that Jesus was Jewish. But when I followed up with, did he remain Jewish throughout his life? She said, "Oh no, he became Christian and started Christianity." "When did that happen?" I asked. "When he was baptized by John the Baptist," she said, confidently. "It says so right in the Bible," she added. Noah, a young Jewish college student who attended a small New England college, asked his Christian fraternity brothers, what was Jesus' religion? They stared at him as if he were an idiot. He pressed for an answer. Unanimously, they declared, "Christian, of course." The fact is, Jesus was born into a family of practicing Jews dedicated to Judaism. For example, as prescribed in the Torah, Jesus was circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. Throughout his life, he was thoroughly committed to Judaism, the Torah, and Jewish practices. And so was his family. Mary and Joseph and their entire family, the extended family, and much of the population, the Jewish population of Galilee, trekked every year to Jerusalem for the major holidays, particularly Passover, which was, and the other two holidays as well, were mandated by the Torah. And it says so right in the Gospels that they did this every year. How dedicated to your religion would you have to be to make a trek like that every year? 7 days, more or less walking or with donkeys, with no superhighway, making it to Jerusalem over that length of time, 7 days, then spending at least 7 days for the festival, and then the trek back, an arduous task, and then living in a tent city for the most part while in Jerusalem. And consider too that Jesus, when he wasn't talking to crowds outdoors and teaching, he prayed in synagogues and taught Torah to multitudes of fellow Jews, and that's stated as well in the Gospels. In fact, in one of the Gospels, it says that he went on the Sabbath back to his native town of Nazareth, and as usual went to the synagogue and stood up for the read, as usual. And John the Baptist only baptized Jews to purify them for the expected arrival of the Jewish Messiah. And again, all of this is stated clearly in the Gospels. I'm not making it up, folks. Jane's quote is not, though. Christians are astonished when I inform them that the word Jew appears 202 times in the New Testament and 82 times in the Gospels, while the term Christian does not show up at all in the Gospels, not a single mention, and is mentioned only 3 times in the entire New Testament, in the later parts of the New Testament. The first mention is when Paul, the acknowledged founder of an organized Christian church, is preaching in Antioch many years after the crucifixion. Check it out. It's in Acts 11:26. Why is the term Christian absent from the Gospels, which span Jesus' life and ministry? The answer is obvious. Because there was no Christianity during Jesus' life. And the fact that that term and that word never appears is a confirmation of that. With the goal of healing antagonisms, though, and closing the long-standing divide between Christianity and Judaism, I set out to restore the Jewish foundation of Christianity, a foundation that Christianity stands on. In this quest, I explore issues that have been overlooked or minimized, issues that were major factors in severing ties between Christianity and Judaism that blurred their common heritage. And most of these factors were promoted by the leaders in both Christianity and Judaism to separate and to create this divide, not the populaces of Judaism or Christianity. As I continued to struggle with the puzzling question of how Christianity lost touch with Judaism, I discovered a church policy spanning centuries that may have been one of the most important linchpins of the historic Christian-Jewish divide. I'm referring here to the church's ban on Christians owning a Bible, reading a Bible on their own, or translating their Bible into native languages. Now, that may sound preposterous to you, because in fact it is preposterous, but the fact is that it is true that happened. And these edicts persisted well into the 16th century and even beyond. As late as the 16th century, William Tyndale was burned at the stake for daring to translate the Bible into English. And that was the punishment for translating it. And several others historically were burned at the stake as well for translating the Bible. And by the way, Tyndale's translation was quite a good translation. He was not burned because it was a bad translation. In fact, today's King James version of the Bible, 60% of it is William Tyndale's translation. So what Christians knew about Judaism and Christianity was only what they were told by church officials. And what they were told was stripped of Jesus' Jewish identity and included the demonization of Jews. The final blow to the separation, and probably historically one of the most potent forces, was the charge against Jews that they killed Jesus. Christ-killers. Then, when I stumbled on several medieval and Renaissance paintings of Jesus' family and disciples, I was struck by their misrepresentations, distortions, and anachronisms. This prompted me to examine hundreds of other classical paintings from the medieval and Renaissance era. I even took a walking tour of the Renaissance galleries of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. To my astonishment, Jesus, his followers, and his Jewish community were consistently pictured as blonde, fair-skinned, Northern European, latter-day Christians, often surrounded by latter-day saints, that is, saints from the medieval and Renaissance eras, Christian clergy from the latter centuries, and Christian artifacts, like the crucifix. The crucifix, by the way, in the time of Jesus, was actually a hated symbol. And for obvious reasons, because it was reminiscent of the untold numbers, the thousands upon thousands of Jews whom the Romans crucified. And these medieval images of Jesus and his family were totally at odds with biblical facts. They are, in fact, falsification of biblical history, and that is without a trace of any Jewish connections for Jesus and his family. I mean, simple rural Jewish folks who were totally committed to Judaism are totally transformed into latter-day Christians. I concluded that these distortions of omission established a powerful platform for anti-Semitism that continues to reverberate today. These artworks, in inventing the Christian Jesus, setting him apart from Jews, when in fact they were all part of the same Semitic tribe. But you look at these medieval and Renaissance paintings, and the way in which Jesus is represented, he seems to be of a different religion, different ethnicity than the others, the Jews. And that's confirmed when you see some of the paintings of the Jews, where suddenly they're not the fair-skinned Northern Europeans. They are quite dark, quite menacing, and often quite ugly. So then I turned my attention to another crucial question that is central in the Christian-Jewish divide. And that question is, did the Jews actually kill Jesus? A charge that has echoed with deadly consequences since the crucifixion. In taking a fresh look at the Gospel's account of Jesus' arrest, trial, and the events leading up to them, I concluded that these narratives made no sense whatsoever, scripts that wouldn't pass muster for an episode of Law and Order today on television. Moreover, the Gospels state explicitly who killed Jesus, a finding that will surely provoke controversy and heated debate. It's puzzling that the true perpetrator has been overlooked or underplayed. For that story, see and listen to my YouTube video titled, God Killed Jesus, According to the Gospels. Have you ever wondered what Jesus might say about virulent and enduring anti-Semitism? Indeed, what would the thoroughly Jewish Jesus have said to church leaders, monarchs, and others who launched murderous acts such as the Crusades, the Inquisition, and genocides in his name, in Jesus' name? In my book, I tackle this question in a mock trial in which Jesus asks these perpetrators, "How do you justify your violent acts based on my teachings, life, and mission?" Indeed, in facing Jesus, what would Pope Urban II, for example, say to justify launching the murderous First Crusade? And I quote, Pope Urban II said, "In the service of Christ." How would Martin Luther explain to Jesus, inciting his followers, the followers of Martin Luther, to burn down synagogues, the spiritual home where Jesus preached in Galilee? Christians today, especially evangelicals, are eager to let go of long-standing antagonisms and are reaching out to Jews in a spirit of reconciliation. But memories of unspeakable persecution over many centuries are a barrier for Jews to participate fully in the healing process. And that's understandable given the gruesome history of anti-Semitism. But ultimately, reconciliation and healing it has to be a two-way street. And in this new environment, therefore, this new environment of reconciliation and reaching out, I appeal to my fellow Jews to drop the Jesus phobia and accept Jesus as a faithful Jew without having to embrace the Christian claim that he was the Messiah. You can still accept him as a practicing Jew, which he was. To encourage this point, I point to the pantheon of false Jewish messiahs through history, many of whom were destructive to Judaism, but are still revered for their teachings, while Jesus is totally rejected. Yes, Jesus was not the only claimant to the Messiah, and there were scores of them, at least 50, and probably more, and Jews reject all of these. And as I say, some of them were very destructive, and yet Jesus was not destructive in any way that we can detect at all, and he's totally rejected. In fact, when I ask Jews, what did Jesus ever do to personally hurt Jews? I've yet to get a meaningful answer. Finally, I could not resist commenting in my book on Dan Brown's popular novel, The Da Vinci Code, and despite the fact that it's a lot of spin. Because, like classical Renaissance artworks, the Da Vinci Code begins with a Jewish story but promptly converts it into a Christian one that jumps ahead to the medieval times and has knights and secret orders and Christian orders of all kinds. But I show how the Da Vinci Code gets recoded when Rabbi Jesus and Mary Magdalene are recast as the Jews who they were. In exploring all these issues and the reality of Jesus' life, I strive to shed new light on the history of anti-Semitism and the destructive forces that have alienated Christians and Jews. And as I've mentioned, those forces were mainly from the leadership, not from the people. My aim is to help heal the rift between Christians and Jews and galvanize the reconciliation process, a process that began with Vatican II and is enthusiastically continuing with Pope Francis. For more information about Jesus Uncensored, Restoring the Authentic Jew, you can visit my website, bernardstar.com. That's bernardstar.com. And for information about the art exhibit that I'm organizing, putting Judaism back in the picture toward healing the Christian-Jewish divide, visit the website of the art exhibit, jewishjesusart.com. That's jewishjesusart.com.